And that is in turn going to raise the problem of social infrastructure, because if you look at the average home or apartment or house, it's designed for two people to live together with their family. But here we are going to have constellations or configurations of people relating to each other who are not husbands and wives or spouses. They are all kinds of genders, and they want to be in close proximity to each other because that makes communication that much easier. And they are going to require some kind of living infrastructure which is comfortable to them and convenient to them. And so we are going to find the kind of social infrastructure emerging that we have not seen before, and still have no idea of what it may look like. If we were to look backwards in history, of course we see structures like the ashrams, we see structures like monasteries, but there's no reason to suppose that the structures of the future are going to be anything like them at all. And we would then also expect that these people who realize that increased connectivity gives them increasing perceptual capacity would naturally attempt to take this connectivity to a level that is much wider than the group of people they are connected to with in a physical, geographically, spatially located area. And we could expect then that they would be using the internet to expand this network to cover the whole of the planet Earth. And when, as we could expect, there perhaps very soon would be colonies of people out in space and maybe on other planets, this network would then extend even as far as we have gone into space, I suppose. And then we would have actually an interesting network, a network of people who know how to connect. And now that's a very interesting aspect of this whole connectivity, because you can't connect brains together without breaking down some of the barriers which prevent us from connecting with more than 1, 2, 3, 4, a small group of people. And one of the biggest barriers to that is what we would call gender and sexuality, because it's impossible to connect to too many people if you're connecting on the basis of gender or sexuality. It simply doesn't work. I mean, we can go into the details of that some other day, but I can tell you it simply doesn't work. This network will be a network that does not have this any traces of gender and sexuality in its conceptual content. This network, because of what it is doing, basically it is engaged in perception, making deeper and deeper and more complex perceptions of course of what is going on. We'll also then begin to see more clearly what it is possible for us to do in collaboration with what is going on. And when I say what we can do, it will be not only at an individual level but also at a collective level. We could even think of the entire human species beginning to consciously cooperate with and collaborate with the process of evolution. I use that word for want of a better word. You could call it creation if you like. We could see ourselves collaborating with this big process of which we also are parts. And we could actually put the autonomy that has been evolved or created within us to good use by consciously intervening in this process, not on our individual egotistical interest, not on the basis of our individual egotistical interests and agendas, but on the basis of the dynamics of this entire process itself, which we will begin to perceive more and more clearly as more and more of us begin to link up across the planet and begin to learn how to use our brains and our minds together to make deeper and deeper perceptions. Now this, very briefly, is an outline of the story of connectivity, and those who are interested can pick out particular areas or details which we would like to explore more deeply, and we could go into those respective areas in depth, and then we could perhaps put all the pieces together and build the big picture that tells us how this connectivity works and how we can actually use it to get to the kind of situation that I just described.
When you meet people, you have to really get to the point where they are. Only then you can connect with them. So for instance, like old people are at a different level, so you have to get to their mindset and connect with them. Whereas children, like they are coming from a different level. Then you go to their level to communicate with them, otherwise they won't be able to understand you.
Let's look at that situation now. That's a very interesting situation, especially the part about the children I was wondering about. But let's look at the most obvious level at which connectivity happens. Let's take it at the level of an adult, or what is considered to be an adult organism. And then you will find basically that the normal thing we see today, because of the way things are, is that you're going to have usually a male, but not always, making an overture towards a member of the opposite sex, requesting sexual access. That's what we see frequently, all over the place, almost all the time, and which is also portrayed in our media very widely. We could take that as a kind of average level of connectivity which is happening in the world right now. I won't look at the implications and consequences of that. Now, if you're talking about levels of connectivity, that's the base level at which we start with. So we can then assume that anybody who tries to connect with anybody else is basically going to connect at that level. Now, if you're looking for some other level of connectivity, then you're going to have to develop the skill by which you can think of it as an energy flow coming towards you at a certain level. Now, how can you engage that energy flow and take it to another level where then you can then respond from that level to that person and force then that person also to come to a higher level, and the person can decide, okay, am I going there or not? Now, in the case of the child, it's a little more complicated because we have to look very carefully at what we mean by a child, because there are some connotations which are not necessarily very helpful. We tend to think of somebody who is a child as someone who is somewhat helpless, someone who has no right to make decisions for himself or herself, somebody who has to be looked after, somebody who is really not capable of doing what he or she wants to do. And then we are talking now about going down to that level. I don't know, I really don't know about how that's going to work, because if you're going to actually communicate with the child, connect with the child, you could communicate with the child without, from whatever level, going down to his level or not. But if you want to connect with the child, you're going to actually have to lift that child up to your level, because now if you're trying to explain something to the child or communicate something to the child, if the child doesn't see what you're talking about, he's going to get frustrated and he's going to behave in all kinds of ways that disrupt you and you make it annoyed with the child. So then the first objective is now to connect with the child and take the child to the level where you are, rather than going down to the level of the child. Then we'll all be children. And that way the child will perhaps get what you're trying to communicate and feel more comfortable relating to you as well.